When you hear the tone, it will be just 3 minutes to showtime. Still time to visit the refreshment stand before the next feature starts.
You know, back when I was with the department, every so often you'd find yourself, burying your nose in something interesting, let's say. And so you'd drag it back to the precinct, and it would just disappear.
Mr. Rathke, I'm not under any illusion that my son is guaranteed to be found alive. If that's the case,
I'm not looking to cause trouble.
I want to know who's responsible.
The man I've been hired to track down is Devlin Cabrera.
You waited for me?
A serial cheater. There's something about these boys that is communicating to him. That they want to be murdered.
Mom's still talking shit about me?
Just about all the time.
What exactly did you see?
What do you need this for?
I'm depressed.
I don't know what you were expecting to do here, Rathke.
Please just pull the car over. Please. Pull the car over.
The rats have more social prowess than the people do. It's horrible.
And now, showtime.
Hello, good evening, and welcome on board to those of you tuning in to Fleapit After Hours, a nighttime podcast devoted to films off the beaten path and of the cult variety. I am your host, Jeremy Brown, and I could not be more ecstatic to finally have this guy on the show. It's been a long time coming. We've been orbiting each other's content for quite some time, and he's most known as the host of Movies, a podcast about the act of cinema, the writer, director, and featured actor of the upcoming debut film Mass State Lottery, and producer of Forgotten Genre Pictures, Mr. LowRes Wünderbred himself. Glad to have you on. How you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic. What an introduction. Thank you for rolling off all my credits here. Boy, howdy. Very exciting year.
between all the different things I've been working on, and also that you and I have been planning, and with Spencer and everything else. So it's good to actually sit down and be able to join you for your program here, and then you'll be coming on mine very soon. So good cross-pollination happening.
Yeah, and it's one of these things where I don't know what film I could possibly even bring up or talk about with someone with your prestigious reputation, but I guess one that really kind of blew me out of the water this year and finally hit Criterion Collection, the little movie called Takeout.
For extra duck sauce.
You know beef? This is chicken, no beef.
Come on, man. Take a little tip. Thank you. Out of here. No speaking English?
Written and directed by Sean Baker and Shih-Ching Tsou. And produced and starring Charles Zhang, Zhang Huayu, Wang Tai Li, and Justin Wan. And it's this little under-the-radar, $3,000 budgeted MiniDV film that, I thought you'd be a perfect guest to talk about this film, especially coming off of, I guess you just had a recent test screening of your movie.
Yeah, well, it was like a friends and family sort of thing where, just giving a preview to everything before it gets cut. Because I don't think I've brought this up on my podcast yet, but for what we have of Mass Day Lottery, the just fleshed out, including every single scene before any sort of cutting, what we wound up with was a 3-hour and 27-minute film. Which I was convinced maybe we shot too little. And then, everything together for that work print cut before we start chopping it up and sending it off to festivals turned out far, far longer than I anticipated or had hoped for. But we did kind of shoot 2 different movies. And I guess it really shouldn't be a surprise. In March 2020, we started rolling on this thing, and we shot it one way, and I previewed what we had, and I felt like this is good, but there's a part of the movie that I think would make everything so much better if we just embellished more into that. And so it originally started out as private investigation film, where it's about a dying private investigation firm, and these 2 partners, Rathke, my character, and Evans, who's played by Nicholas Joroff. He's a very talented guy. And it was kind of like this back and forth, almost like a father-son relationship. And then when you have Hans's character, Hans Lombarbosa, my co-host on movies and my co-star in the film, when his character is introduced, it becomes a different movie. And it the relationship that character has to my character, I think is something that wound up being much more compelling when watching what the original version of that was. And so back in November 2021, after we had done tons of shooting on the movie, I approached everybody and I was like, how would you guys feel if we did basically another round of principal photography? Not reshoots, just let's do brand new material.
Yeah.
And everybody was down for it. And we shot that over 10 days in Massachusetts in November. And it was a blast. It was a lot of fun. We had, plenty of people from our Twitter circle of things coming out and going. And it was just it was almost like a party at a couple of points where you had all these different characters in the mix helping out on this film. And it was just a really grand time. And, we finally finished putting together something that was viewable for outside eyes, not just myself and assistant editor, sound designer. And it's a very long film. It's like the Heaven's Gate of independent film with budgets under $10,000 at the moment. So we gotta cut that down. This movie, Takeout, that we're talking about tonight, being shot on only $3,000 is very impressive to me.
Oh yeah.
Also, I do want to note, you did a damn good job of saying that second director's name. I would have butchered that if I even tried. I was already like practicing it, like Shih-Ching Tsou. So that would have been terrible for my show. What made you pick this movie?
I'm right now. I am on a huge aesthetically on a huge MiniDV kick.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on it's in pre-production stages right now, but I'm working on something that's similar to this, I would say tonally and also aesthetically. So I've been trying to just sink my teeth into whatever kind of like shoots on the same kind of camera quality that I'm kind of playing around right now. It's also just something I grew up with, and I've always had a huge fixation with the homegrown home movie sort of look. It's not quite film, but it's not quite digital either. It finds like a weird little realm in between. And this is like a great example of the ones that I've seen so far where, it does really well at the Slam Dance Film Festival. And then it kind of gets like this quick, like limited release with, is it Kino Lorber or one of those?
Did they put it out?
I want to say it was like one of those because they didn't hit. There weren't many DVDs or Blu-rays of this up until recently.
No, which you got into this right before we started rolling, but this movie is so hard to find anywhere. I thought, all right, because I was interested. I hadn't seen this movie at all before, and I was only made aware of it through the Criterion release because it has like kind of an interesting neon hip. Like streetwear-ish cover art to it, and I was like, all right, I'll do this movie. It'll be on like Criterion app, or I'll be able to find a pirated version of it. No, there's no pirated version anywhere. I checked out all the go-to spots. Nothing. It's not on any streaming app, and there's not even a DVD of it. I thought, all right, well, $27 for a blue. This is the most amount of money I've ever spent for someone's podcast. By the way, 27. Plus shipping and handling. So I decided, it's been a while since I've done a blind buy on a movie. Let's just do it instead of changing the film up. And I happen to be in Brockton, Massachusetts right now, not my usual setup here, and I'm in my parents' basement. And they have a very old Blu-ray player from like 2006 or 2005. The remote's been missing, and all you can do is hit the play button. So I haven't even checked out the supplements on this Blu-ray disc yet. And I'll tell you what, if the subtitles on this movie were not just baked in or ready to go, boy, I would have been fucked. So yeah, I was actually pretty impressed with this selection, and I enjoyed it. Well, not more than I was hoping. I actually did think that I was going to enjoy it, but I'm not too familiar with Sean Baker's earlier films. I know he did Starlet in 2012, and then he had a movie that came out before this. This was his second feature, right?
Yeah, so he does this right after I think this comes before Prince of Broadway. He did a film called Four Letter Words.
Go ahead. A friend of mine at school told me about his friend, and his friend's girlfriend were into fucking crazy fucking kinky sex. She uses like fucking Motorola and shit. I've heard thousands of fucking stories, man. Thousands. Yeah. So anyway, he goes over to her place. Not my friend's friend. He goes over to her place, and they're gonna fucking go at it. She wants to be tied up to the bedpost, right? She fucking strips naked. She's like, tie me up. She wants to be tied up. She wants to be tied up.
And yeah, Starlet was like I think probably his bigger breakthrough. This is the one that just kind of like danced around. What also kind of draws me, and maybe you might have something similar to say, but this comes right from like the end cusp of the Dogma 95 movement that Lars von Trier and Thomas Vinterberg came up with.
Right.
But like a Chinese American version of what you would expect. And they say like that died in 2005, but it kind of, I think it's still going. I mean, obviously I'm part of that too now. So I think there's a lot of indie circles that are still playing with those rules and that genre. But yeah, it's a I would say it's probably one of his strongest films. It is very much him. I think it's such a loose plot. It's very much an aesthetically driven film for him, I think. And I also kind of picked it because of the NYC backdrop, the Upper West Side, I guess. And I figure you could probably speak to what that might have looked like, what it still looks like now. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been working on a documentary on the side about the history of New York in film. And there was so much I wound up learning in the process of that. It's still something that I'm working on. I originally wanted to have it out by this month, this year, but I think I'm going to be revising the last portion of that because there has been this sort of new resurgence of New York films through the whole, and it's kind of hackneyed now, but like the whole Dime Square scene where you have some pretty interesting filmmakers coming out of that. I think like the biggest one that came out was the Scary 61st, which is kind of like, that's a movie that's, it had its moment. We're past that now. Where the spotlight seems to be focused on is on Peter Vack, because Peter Vack is making these, they're not controversial. They're just kind of like rambunctious movies with his friends and family. And there was just he's shooting a film called, I think, RachelOrtman.com or something. And there was a screening or whatever, not a screening. They were taping something in a theater for the movie. And it drew out the film critic who's been on his ass, calling him like a fascist or whatever because of some movie. I don't know if he directed it. Maybe it was like Betsy Brown's film. That's his sister. Actors, where he plays a trans actress or something, and it was looked at as parody.
I've heard about this, but I haven't seen it yet.
I haven't seen it yet either. I'm very curious though, and I know that you gave Private Chat a positive review. You were like the only other person I follow who probably even watched that movie.
I saw a girl and she looks exactly like you.
I bet she wasn't as hot as me.
She looked exactly like you.
Hey, what's the deal with this Jack guy? He's clearly crazy for you. What do you want to show me?
Who is it?
Behind every single interaction that you'll have,
What was that?
is one, maybe two thoughts. What can I get out of this? Or what is it that you're going to do for me?
Very accurately online, but like the type of people that do exist in that space.
Yep.
And I haven't seen anything else that was really like that, and I had checked out Vack's first movie shortly thereafter, Assholes, which got a Vinegar Syndrome release around the same time as Scary 61st. And that's not like a well-shot movie, but it's a pretty fun movie. And it's a pretty funny movie. And it reminded me so much of just like how I've been doing things with a lot of my guys, how you just go out and you shoot people and you don't even really fucking care about like, oh, well, someone's going to sign a release to have their face in the background. And you watch that movie and it's very clear. Nobody signed any releases. Like these actors are just harassing people in Times Square, being total jerks. And it's fun. And I like seeing that sort of independent, transgressive spirit taking shape in some sort of new way. And that is what I see in that Dime Square filmmaking movement at this time. Now, Takeout, I think, is kind of an interesting, very early example of people using what the accessible technology is and doing something, very, again, impressive with that. So during this time, the only other movie that I can think of that was shot on MiniDV that's also in the Criterion Collection is Spike Lee's Bamboozled. Have you ever seen that film?
I know in our Facebook group, I've seen plenty of enough memes, but I have not actually watched it yet.
Yeah, I think I've posted Michael Rappaport's face from that movie quite a few times. But that movie shot on a specific Sony Mini DV cam, except for the ending. The ending they shot in 35 millimeter. And that has a very distinct look. It's also New York City around the same time. And, it shares a lot of qualities with Takeout. This actually looks a whole lot better than the Criterion restoration of that film. And I looked into why that was. And the cinematographer essentially made them go back to the original DV videos of that film. And I don't know if that was the case with Takeout. They might have used the 35 millimeter blow up print. I have no idea what the restoration process was like for this film, but this to me looked good. I like the off-putting green, kind of like my webcam's color tone saturation to the film, and how wet everything was. It captured just like how wet and dirty New York is, and this poor guy just biking back and forth and dropping off these deliveries. And it shares the same plot as Pusher, basically, which is another very like down and dirty indie gritty film where somebody got their start, and that was Refn. Of course, there's no like drug angle to this or anything, but it's like, you owe money, you got to pay the money today. If you don't pay the money today, something bad's going to happen.
Yeah.
And just a number of different difficulties getting to that. What I really loved about this film is that it's not an absurd amount of money. It's not an amount of money like anybody should really have a hard time mustering up if they need to. It's $800. He has to get $800 by the end of the day. And if you don't have $800 and you need to pay $800, that's difficult. That you might as well be saying, oh, well, you got to pay $5,000 by the end of today. So just to see, I don't want to describe a delivery man as a lowly creature, but like seeing someone at that status be given a fairly accomplishable task, but knowing that is still an uphill battle. I like that. I like how personal and small stakes that is. And I thought it was very well executed.
Yeah, and also to just be like the bird's eye view of it. It's not like you're it's not like it's tension after tension after tension. It's just a day in this guy's life. Okay, one day he owes a bit of money. And even, I know it's 2000, it's like 2002, 2003 when they shoot this. Even by then, like still like with that kind of budget, that's still hugely impressive. Like no one was making things on a whim kind of with that kind of money. You need at least, if you want to be like an indie filmmaker back then, you would need at least like 10,000 to make something kind of on that level. And yeah, that's what I kind of got out of it. It's just a slice of life sort of film, which we're starting to unearth and revisit, because this is going to be the running trend with my podcast, but it's just like with the kinds of things we get coming out now, where everything is so polished and so fake and doesn't really want to show just an individual's like side of things. This something like this is kind of just needed to reflect on. And this is one of the few times I'll give kudos to Criterion for doing a really impressive job with polishing this and bringing it back into the limelight. Because Criterion, as much as we like give it shit, like they'll do something like this, and then they'll also dish out something like, I don't know, Wall-E is now on the Criterion Collection, which okay, even of the Pixar variety, like that's such an odd choice that they would even go with that one. Like I understand animated films like Watership Down or Fantastic Planet on there, but Wall-E, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I like Wall-E. I'll be honest with you.
That was like probably one. Yeah.
That was one of the last, I think. So at the time Wall-E came out, this was 2008. 2008 was such a great year for movies. I went to the movies like 50 times that year. I was dating a girl who unfortunately would later grow up to be a Disney adult. Which I wound up getting dragged to a couple of different Pixar movies. So I saw Wall-E, I saw Up, and I saw Toy Story 3. And that's like a good run of animated movies, and that was also, I think, like the last time that Pixar or Disney really had any integrity before shifting into, we have to do sequels. We got to do all these spinoffs. We're going to work on Incredibles 2 and this and that. And, now they just seem to be the reboot business. And I like that Wall-E is included, but here's the thing. I think it is a very bad sign for the Criterion Collection because Wall-E's being integrated, and we saw, all right, it was kind of an exciting moment when they started taking in Netflix movies, right, or streaming movies that were nominated for Best Picture back in 2019. I think The Irishman and Parasite were the first picks that got factored in there. But now you take a look at the Netflix movies they're plugging, and it's like Power the Dog, and you have Sound of Metal from Amazon Prime. It's all the like very dull streaming service Best Picture nominees that they're culling at the moment. And Wall-E getting in there makes me think it's probably only a matter of time. Like if they were to say, if Disney were to say to Criterion, we want to put out with you guys, we don't want to put out The Lion King. We don't want to put out the new Lion King. We want to put out The Lion King 2 Simba's Pride on Criterion. Is Criterion going to say no to that? No, they're not. They're going to take it because they're going to get those Disney bucks. And the integrity of Criterion will start to diminish and probably reach something that's a closer level to their Laserdisc days, where they were just a manufacturer. They were just a distributor for these movies because nobody else was really in that business. They had all the massive titles, and it had nothing to do with prestige or what do they say? Contemporary and classic films. Yeah. That will fall to the wayside. But I think that's also just the nature of the beast as far as physical media goes. As we move further down the line, you're going to see all these big companies like Sony and Warner Brothers and Disney, especially since they have Disney Plus now, outsourcing their physical media lines because it's too much money and it's not really worth the investment, as opposed to licensing their titles to these boutique distributors like Criterion or Vinegar Syndrome or Arrow. Warner Brothers has started to do that. They even got rid of their Warner Archive line. That's just print on demand now through Amazon. And they're very flimsy, cheap discs. I got their Year of the Dragon Blu-ray, and that seemed to be in good condition, but I also believe that was printed before they made that transition over to print on demand. And then I got Star 80, the Bob Fosse film, their DVD of that. And it's probably the worst, cheapest DVD that I own. And you can always tell because the DVD is thinner than your average DVD. And you can, it's like the musical Saw. If you just want to like wobble it up and down, it'll make that noise. So I don't know. Is it that big of a deal? Probably not. Everything undergoes change and decay and new distributors pop up. I don't even think that Criterion's the best at what they're doing anymore, really. No, I don't know. Where do you stand on that? Are you invested in the boutique Blu-ray game at all?
About as much as like the average film collector when I can. I was actually going to give a quick shout out to Severin Films as well. They've been doing a pretty good job of restoring a lot of giallo films in particular. I know we're in spooky season right now as we're recording this, but they're also pretty good, a little underground compared to some of the other Arrow video counterparts.
Right.
But yeah, I'm kind of in that scene a little bit where I'm just, if it's one where I have a good hunch that it's going to look good and actually have a lot of bonus material like this film does, usually I'm kind of satisfied. But it is starting to turn into that sort of competitive corporate nature now where you have to pick a side. Are you team Criterion? Are you team Vinegar Syndrome or something? And place your bets on who's actually who cares more about the film and less I guess the money side of it. But
I don't think I own any of the Severin film releases, but I saw that they did a restoration or a release of Dennis Hopper's Out of the Blue recently, which I wanted to pick up, and it had just like a gorgeous box and everything else. The one thing, I think that Criterion probably still has the title of like the best all around. I mean, not if you just put the amount of titles aside, they typically have some of the most well-rounded and well-packaged films that they put out there. I would say that Arrow is like de facto like number one as far as supplements go. Nobody really is even close to them as far as that goes. And like their 4K Blu-ray releases that they do internationally and everything else, it's just very impressive. The only thing that, and I've griped about this on my podcast, probably other people's podcasts, is I hate the artwork that they put in there. They do allow you to flip it over and everything, but I can't stand the comic booky style of art that seems to accompany those. And I think that might be part of the reason why Shout Factory and Scream Factory, which was like their subsidiary off print for horror movies, doesn't really seem to be in business anymore. Or if they do print anything, it's like TV shows or something now. I haven't seen them putting out any horror films for a second. But I have quite a few of those releases too.
On the show last year, we covered the film Ravenous, which is now under the, I think it's either Shout or Scream Factory restoration. But that's a film that's like notorious for having like one of the worst covers ever. And they still, even with that new release, they did nothing to fix it. And it's just, I think of like that as an example. I think of like that Parasite cover that Criterion has as well.
Oh yeah, what was that about? Talk about overthinking it. Just they all overshot it completely.
Yeah, it's just something you can do in 5 minutes in Photoshop. It's not even anything worth talking about. Even the original poster wasn't even that great, but at least it gets its point across. And
yeah,
I don't know. I'm such a stickler for the all those floating heads in the dark, like, or even what they did in the fucking 90s with I don't know if it was the Scream series that kicked this off, but it's like we're all gonna stand. The whole cast is just gonna stand in front of the cover. We're all gonna dress in black. We're gonna look a little goth.
Black turtleneck, so it's just floating faces essentially.
Yeah,
those Scream movies. Yeah, if you buy the original VHS set, it's just like 5 faces, and they're all lined up. Boop boop boop. Nev Campbell in the middle.
Yeah.
And I remember for like by the time they got to the third one, they didn't even really know who to like put on the cover. It was like, all right, well, we're gonna do the main 3 here. We'll just put in like the black kid from the Cosby Show and Parker Posey, I guess. I feel like the 90s into the early aughts is really where poster design started to show signs of wear, and they leaned into convenience much more than something that was going to be eye-catching and I think a little more illustrative of what you're going to be in store for, and it sucks. It's unfortunate, but I don't know. If you take a look at many foreign posters, you don't really seem to run into that problem. I've made this point before, but if you take a look at any US Blu-ray release versus any Japanese Blu-ray release, there's no comparison. The Japanese put more effort into the general design of the packaging and the cover art, and generally speaking, probably posters as well, more than the US distributors. And I don't understand the mentality of that. There just seems to be a difference in priorities as far as releasing of art goes.
Well, because there's kind of, when you look at a Japanese poster for most anything, and there's kind of a story there on its own. You don't know what it's about, but you're like seeing all of these images just kind of complement one another they make every movie look way crazier than maybe it is, but that's kind of the appeal.
Mm-hmm.
I just shared a Japanese poster of Tenebrae, the Dario Argento movie, and it's way better than the original one in my opinion. But it's you take a movie like Takeout with this Criterion cover, and it's just our main guy Ming Ning sitting there at the table, and the title's up top. I'll give this one sort of a little bit of a pass in terms of that's just kind of more representative, I think, of what this movie is. A very grainy MiniDV film, a very documentary-esque, pseudo-realistic edge to kind of show somebody just, it could be anybody in New York City, just trying to get through his day. So this cover is fine in my book, but
yeah, I definitely don't have any issues with the cover art for this feature. And just to get back to the movie itself, Takeout does jump into something that I think is like a blind spot as far as American storytelling and culture. I've had these like conversations lately that it was interesting timing that you had suggested this movie about what like the Asian immigrant experience is in many of these big cities. We had done, and on the topic of Dogma 95, I used to do a like a YouTube reality show with some of my collaborators, like Jacob A. Miller, the cinematologist, who I think you've had on here before, and a couple of the sketch comedy guys, and we branded a Dogma 95 reality show. It's called Glue Addict. And there was one time where we were just going to the Red Box, and Jake was giving his takes on all the films that happened to be there. And it was like Shaft 2019, one of the most like forgettable remakes now at this point. I think nobody even remembers that got put out. And we saw this van that pulled up right behind us. We're in like a Walgreens parking lot. And the van just like dumps out 2 or 3 Asian women, and they run off to their apartments. And, of course, there's plenty of sex trafficking jokes being made, like, but then another van pulls up and the exact same thing happens again. And then a third van, only 5 minutes apart, pulls up and it happens again. And then you cut to months later, and they did bust a sex trafficking ring in that area. And there's this underground thing that happens, and it exists in sex trafficking, but it exists in like a grand scale where there are these crazy, very like low society living conditions that you see in this film Takeout, where Asian immigrants will come to America and they will stay like 7 to 15 people in an apartment and rent that out and go to work and come back and knock out. And it's usually a very disgusting living environment. Like when I was living in the projects in Massachusetts back in the late aughts and early 10s, there were apartment buildings where that was the case. And you saw a ton of people coming and going all the time. You didn't even really know who the hell your neighbor was, because there's like literally 12 people in a 2-bedroom apartment.
知道我们今天为什么在这里？钱在哪里？
刚来的时候也是一样嘛。
看他们。
现在你今天晚上得给我生800块出来，要不然欠蒋先生钱就2倍。
I think it's very interesting that this movie delves into that, and it probably directly had to do with Sean Baker and female directors' living environment at that time. I don't know if you read the booklet on the inside, but it said that they were living right above a Chinese restaurant, which must have been fucking gross. They must have had so many roaches coming upstairs in their apartment. I would have hated that.
Well, because it was a mix of like, I'm sure the environment was very gross, but like, I can smell all the food. I know you're vegetarian, so some of the stuff probably didn't quite as appeal to you, but like, I'm like, oh man, I just want to order Chinese takeout now.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been pretty bad about that lately. I had some chicken yesterday, actually.
Oh no,
but yeah. So, I think it's just a very interesting setting in a place and time that is only starting to come to focus now as far as like aesthetics go. We're very out. I mean, there's still some people bafflingly latching on to 80s aesthetic like it hasn't been dead for 10 years. And we had like a kind of a blip of a 90s moment where 90s fashion, and we're still in it. The trends on like streaming anyway are very 90s right now. The fact that it's like a Dahmer show that's #1 on Netflix, I think is part of that. Or like the notion that there are like these slasher movies that are popular, slasher TV shows now that are popular. Like they turned, I think it was Pretty Little Liars, or one of these shows into a slasher series. Bring It On was turned into a slasher film. That seems to be what the taste is. Fear Street, 1994, 1980s. That whole thing. And for people who are like hip to aesthetics and in the know right now, it's all Y2K aesthetic. People are shooting music videos on MiniDV cams like crazy right now. That's the number one thing. And that is just what the flavor of the moment is. I'm very excited for it. I'm currently planning for it. I'm just warming up for when 2008, 2009 aesthetics are in play. That's going to be my next project anyways, is touching that period of time. But I'm very into this sort of aesthetics that I can very firmly recall from when I was like 10, 11 years old and hanging out, and just that sort of vision of what New York was in 2000, 2001, 2002. And I think this movie captures that well.
Well, and I think Takeout also comes. I listened to most of the commentary and then watched some interviews and featurettes with Sean Baker and the crew and the cast. And part of it has a lot of those sensibilities about like the post 9/11 sort of commentary a little bit. And this is something I've always admired about Sean Baker, is that he's gone on record saying like he doesn't condone or condemn any of the actions of his characters, what goes on or in their day-to-day lives, what the plot revolves around, and just who they are as people. He just shows them objectively for who they are. He does have some biases I've come to discover over the years. He has mentioned that if he had made this in I guess around Trump's America, he would have probably made some other connections to like the border of the wall and everything. And
it would have been a Mexican delivery man.
Yeah, something like that. But even then, like, he still has I would say the creative maturity to not let his own biases get in the way of just like a film that's just kind of, again, shows an individual immigrant and what they're kind of going through. And it's interesting that, like, you can definitely speak to the nature of what this guy is even going through, like living in an apartment with like 12 other dudes, letting these smugglers in, like, take a beating and getting as much tip money as he possibly can, and having like a very, I don't know, I like that, like, there is also, with all of that like in place, there's some comedic relief. He's got a very like loose and just chill coworker who is like, yeah, you can take my shift, you can do all these other runs. And then there's another coworker who I guess kind of wants like to commandeer everything and is kind of like a bit of a bossy guy. And then you have the main lady who actually does work at that restaurant, who's just hitting it off with like every customer, even the difficult ones. I just love like all the back and forth banter between all of those kind of different kinds of characters. And then you kind of have a mostly silent protagonist who just, at the end of the day, wants to see his wife and kid again. And it's like, it's a very relatable sort of story there. But I don't know if you had the same kind of response.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think these characters are so down to earth and relatable in just like, again, and I think it all comes back to having such small stakes that make it relatable. Because what this guy's mission he's essentially stuck on here is something that should be accomplishable. And so it's something that everybody has gone through to some extent in some form or another at any moment in time. But he happens to be in this very disgusting city, in this Chinese restaurant, going to people's doors, people who are often very condescending or rude to him, and he's just trying to do the best he can. He's also trying to learn manners in these situations a bit, where, his sort of desperation and his lack of social energy is perhaps even impairing him as a charming delivery man or what have you. Well, what do you think about Sean Baker's work in general? It kind of surprises me that he might, and I guess it really shouldn't, that he might have such Well, I mean, listen, I don't know. I'm just going off of what you said, but it sounds like he has some sort of degree of political derangement or whatever regarding 2016 and onward, which I didn't really get from Red Rocket, even though, there's those moments where you're cutting away to the TV and it's like part of that moment in time. I didn't really take that as like, this is Trump's America. There were also clips of Hillary Clinton that happened to get played on the television. They weren't like inspiring or positive. They were pretty. It was all pretty neutral across the board.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's surprising, but I'm glad we didn't have like a Pakistani Muslim American post 9/11 getting racist remarks or something. That would have been so dumb and played out. And on that same note, actually, have you ever seen Criterion put this out also? This movie Pushcart Man.
I saw a poster for that just floating around recently, but I have not actually seen it. No.
पाकिस्तान सही हाँ हाँ लाहौर मैं भी लाहौर से मैं भी हूँ यप मोहम्मद अहमद
So you're the new guy, huh?
I'm the new guy.
You didn't tell you. This guy's a rock star in Pakistan.
Well, it's a decent movie. I mean, it's not shot in the same way as this, but it's a lot of the same vibes, and it's more of a like a pushcart vendor who's just trying to like get by, and it's kind of a frustrating movie in some ways. But I feel like there are a lot of tonal similarities to Takeout, although Takeout feels more pressing and like a clock winding down, and less. Although I think it does do a great job of just giving you a taste of like living in this sort of character's life and marinating in that. Pushcart Man only offers that. There's not really this sort of goal in place that needs to be met by the end of the day, or else something bad's going to happen. I will say one negative about this movie Takeout is that those two guys at the beginning, the heavies that show up with that hammer, are the least intimidating heavies in maybe the history of film. They didn't even show like the hammer coming down or anything. It looked very limp wristed. It was not impressive to me. Otherwise, fine, fair enough. Everything else
gotta have one gripe or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But for like an 85-minute feature shot for $3,000, I think it nails it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you asked earlier on like what I kind of make of Sean Baker's other films. I think I try to treat them all kind of differently because they all have, again, that kind of slice of life. I guess just like old, even though like leaning like to working class sort of Americana, where it's just what people of that nature are going through and doing just a different spin with a new state or a new environment, each one. I'm saying environment a lot. I don't know why, but you get what I'm saying, where it's like a different place. And Red Rocket, I thought was one of my favorites of last year because it was, it is weird that he kind of has some of that TDS floating around. I know you guys were talking about that in Anthony Sisco's Drunk on Movies somewhat recently, and I think Sean Baker's a weird exception where I think he's just very bored with politics and just kind of wants to like he's just one of these more braver filmmakers, in my opinion, that just doesn't mind spending time with like a homeless person and just picking their brain and then say, hey, you want to be in my movie? You don't see that very often. Maybe David Gordon Green kind of comes close to that with some of his work, but that's just something that it's not common. And I think it's sort of just like this support for the everyman that he kind of pulls off in every film. Even when he works with like bigger actors like Willem Dafoe or somebody, he's sort of a draw for just like encapsulating that. And I think that's just something that is severely missing. that I think we all at some point or another want to capture ourselves. But
yeah, he does have a hang up for that like lower middle class kind of individual, and I think that permeates every single one of his movies. At least it seems like if you go based off of this film, I haven't seen his first film. I haven't seen Starlet, although Starlet sounded kind of similar. That's definitely the recurring trend of his most recent films. And I agree with it with Red Rocket. That was, I think, my second favorite movie of 2021. And I was caught off guard by how much I enjoyed that, because I had kind of a lukewarm response to the Florida Project. And I did go back and watch Tangerine shortly after watching Red Rocket, and I think I was able to appreciate it a lot more, and the humor in it a lot more, especially James Ransone's character.
Her mama.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Bitch, call me. Oh, your wife is hot.
He's fantastic, and you do see that sort of gritty, wanting to use inexpensive technology to accomplish something that is large in scope with that film. That people don't often think about that, but that was groundbreaking at the time for having shot a movie completely on iPhones, right? Which is not something I think you had seen prior to that, except for in short films. Park Chan-wook was hired to do a short film on the iPhone 4, and that was screened theatrically in 2008 or 2009. It was called Night Fishing. And that was the only other really big, explosive thing to have been shot with that sort of technology. And Tangerine comes along, does an entire feature with it. And that is kind of what makes his career. I guess it took him, what was it, like 15 years or something like that? It was 2016 or 2017.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, he's a very... I don't get the impression from him that he's one of these art school snobby kids who's got a fetish for low class people, like you see with Harmony Korine or someone along those lines. And I'm not bashing Harmony Korine, really. I enjoy his work a great deal, but that is who he is. I don't get that impression from Sean Baker at all. It seems very earnest to me.
I was gonna say, like, it would be an interesting pairing with Trash Humpers, which I always use as an example. Like, if Harmony Korine can make a movie like that, anybody can make a movie. It's very simple. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's Sean Baker. Like, he's been very open about like a lot of his filmic influences. He's a big fan of John Cassavetes. His first like introduction to cinema was through all the classic Universal Hollywood horror movies at the time, and he was a big horror geek, and then he got into like French New Wave, and then Spike Lee, and then all these other guys, and then post college, just everything else. And at that point, he was already like doing his thing. And I always find it really fascinating where it's like you have like these very specific genre oriented films that like are things you're constantly thinking about, or like the themes of them or whatnot. And then the film that you make is completely separate, completely different than, and you see that with all kinds of art, people that just are big fans of things, and then they'll do something that is completely the opposite. And I'd say like all of his films have a similar quality that I've seen, where they're all kind of all about like just the flawed person, the flawed main character, or the guy that is just barely trying to get by. That seems to be the thing he likes to stick with most, because it's probably the thing he's closest to and knows the most himself.
Right.
And so, and I mean, even though like he's getting bigger budgets now, he still sticks with those guns, even with Red Rocket. So,
yeah. Damn, you're bumming me out though. You brought up John Cassavetes. I just remembered right before this show, I was checking. I've been watching this eBay account that has John Cassavetes' autobiography for sale for like $1,200 or something. I was like, one of these days, I'm going to pull the trigger on that. I'm going to get that. And then today, after like 2 or 3 years of me watching it, I had it bookmarked. Someone fucking bought it. Oh man. So I love John Cassavetes. He's absolutely one of my favorite filmmakers, and somebody that I came to very late. I aware of him. A lot of people in my family were fans of John Cassavetes. Not so much his direction, but him as an actor. Because I come from a Greek American family. He's a famous Greek American individual, and I did a complete binge of all of his films, maybe about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and was just so taken aback by what I was missing out on. I tried to give Killing of a Chinese Bookie a watch back when I was like 21 or 22. Title's cool, and the Netflix art was cool. And then I watched it, and I was fucking bored for the entire movie. I was like, there's nothing happening in this film. It's just an older, balding man going around like, oh, wow, he shot an Asian guy. Cool. When's something going to happen? And it took me a while to be able to grow a palette of being able to sit and wait and feel everything out and appreciate what was actually going on within that. But yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on was, I feel like I lost it. It was something you were saying right at the end of the point you were making.
Maybe Sean Baker's influences, I
past
don't know.
that.
Okay.
Damn. It's all right.
No, but here I'll jump off of John Cassavetes at least right now. But two things. One, we were completely stripped of like ever learning anything about him in film school. At least in my experience, like we never watched any of his films. I only at that time had known him for Rosemary's Baby, and I was like, oh, he's a good actor, I guess. And then like I started to really evaluate and look more into his stuff. Like I guess probably around the time that you actually had like said the film Husbands was one of your favorites at the time. And the other thing I wanted to bring up about that was it sounds like, in a weird way, I don't know if he's taking influence or not, but when we brought up earlier about Peter Vack, it sounds like he's taking some influence from the movies of his that I have not seen yet, from Cassavetes, especially like Husbands. If people are just like, dicking around and just being like, just brutes and just assholes to everybody. It sounds like there's a little bit there's some influence there. It sounds like, but. No, I got to get more into his stuff though. I love Killing of a Chinese Bookie. That was one of my favorite watches of that. Was it 2020? I think that was 2020. That was a COVID film. Yeah.
I found the re-edit of that so much more watchable than the original release of that. Do you have a preference between the two?
Probably the re-edit, because I didn't do them back to back, but I did them like a day apart, just to compare. Yeah, I think the more the better. I think when I originally watched the theatrical cut, I wanted it to be longer, and I don't normally say that about movies. I feel like a movie like Takeout, by the way, if it was close to 2 hours, I don't know if it would have stood on its feet as well. I'm glad that it's a very tight, like 80 something minutes.
Yeah.
So.
That is something that I thought, all right, cool, great. 85 minutes, that's easy peasy. And that on paper seems like the right amount of time for that kind of movie. I think if you're working with a film that has not like a significant, learning curve or a wall that the average film goer needs to penetrate in order to be able to take it in, I think you can quell a lot of those problems by just making it a short movie, and in this case, a MiniDV film in 2002 was probably not an active aesthetic choice on their behalf, especially if they're living above a Chinese restaurant in New York City in post 9/11. It was probably just affordable. And the only other film I think that was doing that at that time, 28 Days Later, I don't think had come out yet, right? So that was the other movie where it's like, you can go to Walmart, you can buy 3 or 4 different handheld cameras and just shoot a whole movie on that. And that was an aesthetic choice. I did see some Finding Nemo posters in the background of this movie. So maybe it was like around the time, 2003-ish. But yeah. I can't imagine that if they had the access to 35 millimeter or something, they wouldn't have gone with that. And that probably would have looked great too. But I think knowing to be sort of in and out is the way to go with, early or low budget projects. Because if you really bloat that and make it something insufferable to some people anyway. You're running the risk of turning yourself into like a, this is not really any comparison whatsoever, like a James Rolfe, where you do your angry video game nerd the movie and it's 2 hours and 58 minutes or however long that goddamn movie was. And it's just like, why would you do that? The way to do this was like this: 80 minutes, 85 minutes, have people show up, use the extra footage for something else, which is what I'm doing, by the way, with my 3 hours of Mass State Lottery. I'm going to use that footage for something else.
Nice.
And yeah, so I think 90 minutes is the way to go if you're working on something of this caliber.
Yeah. It's funny you bring up the Angry Video Game Nerd movie again. I think we talked about it briefly in the earlier crossover we did, but that was one I just blindly revisited scenes of because I have it on Blu-ray just as a
have it on Blu-ray.
Oh yeah, well, because I went to the screening of it at the time, and I was it does not hold up as well. But I have
does it look any better on a physical disc?
I think that's how we watched it when it was screening. That's what it looked like when we were at it was the New York Symphony Theater is where I saw it. It looked like they had put in a Blu-ray in a player and then projected it onto a big screen. So it looked how I remembered it. I guess it's fine, but the sound is not good. The sound quality is actually like I come from a sound mixing background, so I understand it's tough, but that definitely didn't hold up. But it's also just it feels like there's like 5 different writers, even though it's just him and his friend doing it. I don't know. I'm only holding on to it as a relic. That's literally the only thing. I'm the same with Ralph the Movie Maker's Lover. I've got that on Blu-ray.
You've got that one too?
Yep,
oh my god.
I got them right in the heyday when they came out. So
that's amazing. Those are going to be
worth a bunch.
Yeah, they're going to be worth something at some point. Do you just have like a shelf for like YouTuber movies?
Oh, dude, I should I should totally make a section just for that.
Yeah, that would rule. Something that also this movie reminded me of, although this is an aesthetic choice, is like recent Michael Mann. Because recent Michael Mann loves to be gritty and digital and have like shitty. Did you see the pilot by any chance to Tokyo Vice?
No, I've been meaning to get into it, but I knew he was behind that.
So Tokyo Vice is based on a memoir from a journalist named Jake Adelstein, who is not like Ansel Elgort's not even like that attractive of a leading man, but believe me, Jake Adelstein got a fantastic deal when Ansel Elgort was cast as him in that series. The real Jake Adelstein has a bunch of moles and lumps all over his face. He's disgusting. But I read the memoir and then I checked out the series, and I guess Michael Mann came on after the fact, after they had already started putting all the parts together, because he was like, Tokyo Vice. This sounds like my show, Miami Vice. I might as well get a producer credit and do something with this. And he directed the first episode. Has nothing to do with the rest of the series, and you can see that because it's still enjoyable, but there's a fall off point. But that first episode has what I like to call like tactical filmmaking, where you see with a lot of young directors now that they are more averse to having blemishes or being perceived as, and maybe rightfully so, being perceived as amateur or doing something kind of shoddily. And somebody like Michael Mann, who's a master, who has paved the way as far as like visual aesthetics and film go, and doing things like invigorating the procedural cop drama with just like beauty, doesn't really care, because he's secure in himself as a filmmaker, and he knows, well, I'm one of the top guys as far as like the visual style goes, so I can do whatever I want. And you see that with like some of his films that are later than 2005 or 6, right? Or maybe even like 2004. It starts with like Collateral, where he's using the Viper camera. What is it? The I don't know, something Viper. And that's got like a very grainy digital look. There's no sort of like restoration to try and reduce the amount of fuzz that happens to be in some of like the darker spots of the film, and it carries into Miami Vice. I guess Public Enemies also has that aesthetic. I haven't seen that movie yet. Black Hat has that to a degree.
Yeah, I was gonna not to cut you off, but I was gonna say I think Public Enemies was shot on MiniDV. I think, yeah,
or at least a digital camera where
some digital, yeah, to give out that look.
And Tokyo Vice, the first episode of that, has this sort of very clunky, like, let's just get the shot done feel to it, where there's things like the cameraman's like wobbling the camera and he like loses his balance or something, and then quickly tries to get back into, focus on the guy. And, you don't see that at all with anything anymore. You don't see that imperfection. And like even the sound design, I'm playing like the opening 5 minutes of the episode, and like there's this just over like one guy who's talking, and it's like very clear that the microphone was too far away, but Michael Mann's just like, fuck it, we're gonna use that audio because it's just gonna put out a vibe, and it does put out a vibe. It all culminates to this weird feel of like, like someone making their first movie, but it everything else is so technically, you're firing at all levels, and you don't see that too often. So watching something like this, it sends like waves of that, and I think there's something to be said about that sort of like, don't worry about making it so perfect that it loses its character mentality. And this comes back to what I was saying before. I didn't even make my point with Bamboozled, the Spike Lee movie, which is that why did this movie look better than Bamboozled when Criterion restored it? And it's because this movie has its texture still in place. Bamboozled did not. Bamboozled, they went back to the MiniDV raw footage and they did a digital reduction of the noise, and it softened it, and it removed some of the sharpness of the image, and then they color graded it greenish, like this film's greenish, like also Memories of Murder was greenish. All these Criterion releases get a green coating of paint, it seems like. And it took away some of the flair, and it didn't make it look as distinct in its canvassing. So yeah, I mean I enjoy when there is that aspect of like run and gun. Let's just finish it. Let's get whatever we can get, and we'll figure it out in post. Aesthetic in place, so long as it doesn't impede upon the overall quality, or whether that be of the scene or the movie itself. If it's a deliberate choice, even if it's, in the moment maybe it wasn't deliberate, but you're figuring out in post and you implement it that way, I think there's something kind of neat about that that is currently lost because everything is so easily fixed up now.
Yeah, well, that texture, as we brought up earlier, is so again, it's just so down to earth and relatable. Even as an example, like Sean Baker spent like the first couple days in that actual restaurant just getting as much B-roll as he could of just them cooking stir fry and wrapping up rice and getting customers all their food in that store. And you can tell it's just like it's like he's making a documentary right there at that point. And that's the main appeal to this, is that it just, there's a fictional element there, but at the same time, like, it's so hyper real. Like you know these people, or you've seen these people, or you've been in these places. I know I sometimes go a little hard on like people that only consume a lot of the mainstream stuff, but like I know that there's like a longing for this style. I think it's definitely something that's wanted. I guess, and maybe not everybody knows how to articulate how they want it, but it's something that that needs to be seen. I guess it's yeah, I don't know. That's what I want to try to capture as much as possible. I mean, we talked about James Rolfe again briefly, but like I'm using the camera he used to shoot his earlier episodes. It's the Panasonic AGX 100. I want to say I can't remember the whole abbreviation, but it's got this real like filmic grit to it. It's got a very pretty decent focus lens, and also very like kind of mentioned, like very green, very murky. You can see some of the dirt and the dust is used, but it's those little specks, like they stick to the lens, and they kind of add like a feel where it's like I can't tell. It's not like the fact that there's no polish, no digital polish, and this is the problem, by the way, with especially the horror movies coming out right now that look like a CW show. There's no polish to this camera. It's very much ingrained in just saying like that. Yeah, we're gonna show off the sweat, the wetness, the water, the dirt of whatever you're filming, whatever you're shooting, and yeah, it's such an acquired aesthetic, but it does wonders for this film that they kept it in that restoration. And yeah, it bums me out that they did that for Bamboozle. I still haven't seen it yet, but yeah, that's a shame.
Yeah, I think that we're living in an era where it's kind of interesting in that there's a dichotomy of seems like everybody loves movies, right? Letterboxd is suddenly very popular with everybody, and they all think that they love movies. But then you'll have these movies that are actually like mentally invigorating to sit down and watch. And the reception to that is poor. Or you have people who do work in show business and they work on like all sorts of different projects, commercials, Hallmark movies, whatever it might be. And you'll see them like posting their Ari Alexa that they're working with or something. And cool. But like you're shooting a fucking Kleenex commercial with that thing. Like what am I supposed to be excited? And so I think there's two planes that are currently existing here. And it's like people who go to film for a reason, right? And then people who like the idea of film and filmmaking and everything that comes out of that. And this is what's the predominant culture right now as far as movies go, and why the taste is the way it is, and why you're seeing things like those CW style horror movies that just all look very flat, right? They all look very digitally, like the lighting might be okay, the costume design might be okay, but there's just something off about it. There's something about it that doesn't feel very thought out. Maybe it's like the camera they're working with or the camera angles, or there's no real experimentation that's happening in the moment. If there is experimentation that's happening, it's like, maybe we should have this CG blood go to the left instead of head on. Great, cool. Nobody really wants to get creative in the process of it or try and say interesting things nearly as much as they used to. And so when you do see that, it's something that I think will naturally draw its own audience, regardless of whatever the level of things are with that release. If it's not getting a theatrical release, it doesn't really seem to matter at this moment anyway. If you wind up on Amazon Prime or some streaming network or whatever, if what you've got is doing something different and legitimately different, not just like we're going against the culture, we're the counterculture of filmmaking, those movies don't really seem to do anything. They disappear fast. But if you're doing something that's interesting and cannot be found in anything else, people will find that. People will pick that up, and hopefully you'll be allotted a second opportunity to do that. So, yeah, I mean, I think the commodification of film as an industry and how that has got so intertwined with just like IP culture with Disney and everything else. It has created this like false notion of what it means to be into that medium. And I don't know how you get out of that. I guess, I mean, the only way is people making interesting art through that medium and hoping that it takes with enough people and can adjust the taste buds, the sensibilities of the people who might be in the middle or just curious.
Yeah, because what it creates is like this very, like you say, kind of this Disney lizard frog brain that just well, this is just the setup of things. This is just how it is. So there's even the types that will say like, oh, I recognize this isn't great, but I'll just accept it. I'll be forgiving of it. And I'm so past the point now where it's just like, no, this is just, come on. We need something that's actually trying to be something or say something and be an honest film and less a product. You know, a great example you brought up, I know you really liked it. I liked it too. Netflix's Blonde.
Yeah.
The Andrew Dominic movie. That, you know, I'm in the midst of a lot of people who would turn a movie like that down because of just the content, the way it represents Marilyn Monroe, the way it's paced, the way it's got this very almost dreamlike and nightmarish sort of quality, and how it goes against just everything you're seeing at the moment. I don't know where I was going with my point there, but you're not seeing that kind of stuff as often,
right? I think that's the big example, at least this
at
month.
the moment.
Yeah. You know, we got an interesting double tap of Blonde and then Dahmer on Netflix, and Netflix otherwise is like never really discussed among people. I think Squid Game was like a fun month and a half of people being into that. And I guess
up until that very ending.
Yeah. So people seem to enjoy that, but it wasn't really something that was, you know, it was a commercial hit. You know, it wasn't something that I think was mentally stimulating or anything along those lines. And I enjoyed Squid Game, but I mean, it was what it was. And so you have Blonde come out, and then you also have Dahmer come out, and Dahmer feels like, you know, there's two different shows in there. You could have had like a good 5-episode series about Dahmer and his family and everything else. And then you have the roughly 5 or 6 hours that seems to be dedicated to Niecy Nash's character and the victims, and how the victims were just angelic, perfect people. And it feels like a mandate, and it sucks. And it takes away from the series a bit. But it was still a fun, enjoyable series. And the fact that Dahmer's portrayed in some moments as like a charming or funny character, and that the victims' families weren't contacted and, you know, given, you know, a method of showing approval for the series beforehand, which I think is a ridiculous notion. You know, he got it, you know, in some trouble, got them in hot water a bit. And then Blonde, similarly, based on a novel, based on a real person, many real people, is getting raked over the coals by critics and audiences because of that. And if you investigate many of these criticisms, they're just like, oh, it's horrible, it's irredeemable, it's awful. Well, why? What did you have a problem there? Oh, well, the characterization of Marilyn Monroe. And okay, but well, besides that, what if it was just like, what if her name was Jane? Okay, and Jane just so happened to be exactly like Marilyn Monroe. Okay, what then? What are the problems there then? A lot of these people don't really have anything beyond that. It's just they're repulsed by the existence of it. And that's not good enough. So I do think that there is optimism to be found, because Blonde was also watched by a lot of people. Blonde was, I think, the #2 most watched thing on Netflix, and maybe the most watched movie when it dropped. And it's probably still doing well because people won't shut up about it. There's still articles coming out about Blonde. So I think we are maybe in the middle of a U-turn, but it's going to take some time. And people really have to be comfortable with giving interesting filmmakers or filmmakers who have the capability to say something interesting or fresh a platform and an opportunity to express that. And once that starts to happen, we'll have a renaissance. And maybe that'll have to start in Europe or something, because the Europeans have a different mentality entirely when it comes to film, especially the French.
Yeah, the French. I was going to say also right now the Australians and the New Zealanders. They're getting America down better than Americans are doing right now.
They absolutely
which is shameful.
The reinvigoration of 2 mid-20th century pop culture characters that haven't been relevant for like 20 years. You get Elvis and you get Blonde, within a like 5 or 6 month span. And, I can't go a day without seeing like people posting Elvis something somewhere now. And Marilyn Monroe, I think similarly, it'll be the same reaction, although it does make her seem like a fucking lunatic, just a total empathetic, sympathetic character, but a psycho nonetheless.
A total mess. Like does not have it together, and it's that. And I agree. I think there is a slow U-turn happening. It just takes enough voices though to kind of get it to that point. One of the criticisms, by the way, I did see, or I guess it's like a common criticism, is that Blonde is very nihilistic, and that you could probably make that point in many areas, but I think a little bit of that punch needs to be there in terms of revealing an expose of that kind of industry, if we're relating it to Hollywood or anything. More people need to, I guess, at least they don't necessarily have to watch it if for whatever reason you do you. If the content is not for you, I don't know why it's got an NC-17. It's a very tame R-rated film at the least. But if the content's not for you, then whatever. But like people should broaden their minds at least as to what kind of goes on in this kind of industry and how just seedy and uncomfortable all of it is. And be open.
Well, they wanted a speech at the end where she's going to tell off the Hollywood executive, because that's her. They need, it was her. It should have been her story, not history. When it came to Blonde, they want everything to be hidden figures. If it's not hidden figures and at least 35% fiction, but in a positive spin, then it's a negative. And I don't even entertain the criticism that it's a nihilistic film. What if I like nihilism? Maybe I want more nihilism. How about the 70s? Plenty of nihilism, best era for movies. Nobody argues that. Every single film had the most downbeat, depressing ending. Someone always getting a fucking shotgun to the face or getting run over, someone abruptly dying. That's all of those movies. I think that's good, especially after all like the fake sincerity we've had in movies from all these corporations over the past 10 years. It started really, I think, around like 2006 or 2007, where they first injected that sort of faux sincerity and sentimentality into sitcoms. And I think you saw that with like the Office remake with like the Jim and Pam characters. A lot of those characters are very like forced. We're normal. We're just regular Joes, and then you started to see that in films. And then it evolved into like, okay, well, we don't even need to like try and persuade you that these characters are likable or rootable or quirky in their own way, like Parks and Rec style quirk characters. We're just going to latch on to your sentimentality for childhood nostalgia. And obviously we went through that whole period where that's the thing. And then they kind of gave up on that too, because now they just have Marvel movies, the M word. I didn't even want to say Marvel once on a podcast this year, but it
always gets brought up. Yeah.
Yes. It's the elephant in the room every single time when you're talking about movies. Marvel. Now they just have that, and people will show up for that regardless of the level of quality. So, but even that's starting to like put people off. I think that's running on fumes. They don't know what the hell to do. And that's a good thing. That's going to be a great window of opportunity for better and more interesting things to be made. Although on the note of takeout, I actually did note that some of these Chinese actors were not that great because they had just zero energy, and it wasn't like a conscious acting choice, zero energy. It was just like, what's my line? I got to read it off a piece of paper. Okay, give us the money.
Yeah, well, because none of them are actually actors, really. That's right. The thing. They're all friends. And I will say that's one other thing I will kind of admire about this new filmic style of just like, it's always a risk, but like working with people well, working with friends, working with family even. It's it's a forgotten art, and anybody that's not making something for $3,000 like Sean Baker is, and his female friend also directing. Well, I'm not going to say her name.
Female. What is the relationship there? They're living together. She still pops up in his movies, even though he's married to an Asian woman. I don't know what's going on. She
produces like pretty much everything he does. I don't know what's going on there.
Very curious. I want an investigation here of Sean Baker's relationship with Shih-Ching Tsou. I think that's what needs to happen. There needs to be a YouTube expose on, were they a couple? Was he just friend zoned during that time? What was the deal? Why is she still involved in his project? She's married too, I believe. She has a kid, I think, and he's married. Yeah. So I don't know. Very curious relationship there.
I'll just say every paparazzi image you see, or any promotional stills where they're like standing on the red carpet or something, they are the two together. The wife and the husband, they're gone. They're from the picture.
Oh, really?
For the most part.
Oh,
so
no.
Yeah. Just
these Hollywood people have very well. I mean, I guess they're not that Hollywood, but like anyone in showbiz seemingly has like their husband or wife, and then their like spiritual fucking partner that they work. Like, it reminds me of when Kate Winslet thanked Leo at the Academy Awards instead of her husband, who was in the audience or whatever. It's that sort of thing. Like, oh yeah, Uma Thurman was seeing Quentin Tarantino during Kill Bill. You know, they were just having sex or dating or whatever. Oh, she was also married to Ethan Hawke during that time, and they have a kid. It's just like, do you just have like multiple boyfriends and girlfriends if you're a certain level of fame? Is that just an expectation? But I don't know. That's their business, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool. She pops up in Tangerine too, by the way, as the donut shop clerk.
Yeah. Just further examples of just their connectivity.
Their polyamory. Yes.
There you go. Yeah. The orgies that happen every shoot. I'm trying to think if I had any other notes here. What did I say? Not a whole lot happens, but it's refreshing just to see a day in a dude's life on the New York streets. A bird's eye view. What can't you love? Yeah, that's kind of how I would describe this movie, like in a nutshell. It's just, you're spending a day with this guy. Could be anybody. Could be a Chinese immigrant. Could be, I don't know, some guy off to the bank. It's one of these just great little portraits, shot in a style that is not like any other, and we need more of, and we need to see more of, and hopefully I will eventually contribute to more of that said style. So do you have any closing thoughts, LowRes, on Takeout?
No, I think it's a fun little film for 85 minutes and the budget that they have. I mean, I'm just going to repeat everything I've said before, but if you're into that sort of gritty kind of hole in the wall style of filmmaking, it's a fantastic example to go with, and maybe even like a good solid entry point into Sean Baker's filmography, since it is pretty light and breezy, all things considered. I don't know, I enjoyed it a lot. It might be, aside from Red Rocket, I think it might be my favorite of his.
Definitely mine. I need to go back to the Florida project and even Tangerine. I need to revisit again, but this might be my favorite of his that I've seen so far. At least it inspires me to just kind of get out there and get something made. And it's style.
On that same note, it did make me start looking into like older video cameras and whatnot, because I think you do have to look at it as you're just working with like a different paint set and different canvas, but in this medium, right? And the ability to lean into that, and I think you can get away with that, especially nowadays, where that palette has expanded and people are more open-minded to checking out different like visual styles, and there's an opportunity for more people to see that than there were in 2002 or 2003. I think the potential is limitless, and I don't know, I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with that style of camera, or the James Rolfe style of camera as well, and seeing what can be made.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Check out Takeout if you have not. If you can find a way to not have to spend $27 on a film, on a Criterion release of it.
They just had the Criterion sale literally like 10 hours after I bought it.
Yes,
too.
They did.
It was the worst timing I could have purchased it. But I think it's gonna. My guess is that it's gonna hit the Criterion channel very soon, because I don't know if you've seen this. This past week, they're doing a screening of the movie at some theater, and so both Sean Baker and I don't want to just keep saying the female, right? That's so misogynistic. Shih-Ching Tsou have been giving interviews and talking about this movie. So we picked a good time, I guess, to be doing an episode on Takeout.
Are they screening in New York?
I think so.
Okay.
It might have been L.A. when I was reading the article, but I think they want to show off the restoration that they've done of this movie, and so they're probably going to do a couple of different theaters throughout the U.S. and major cities.
1个小时，可以的啦。
To close, LowRes, thank you again for coming on Fleapit. It's been a long time coming. I know we've been meaning to do something like this for quite a long while, but I guess for old listeners and new listeners and those who are just discovering you for the first time, what would you like to plug out to the Fleapit fans? Anything that you are working on or anything that's on the pipeline, fire away. This is your chance.
Well, just check out ForgottenGenres.com, because there are a couple of different projects that are listed there through my production company, including Mass State Lottery, which we talked about tonight, the New York on Film documentary that I'm currently also working on, and Anthony Sisko's The Body, which I'm in the process of also restoring, and we're going to do a new release of that. I think for probably... it's looking more like early 2023 as opposed to this year. So yeah, check that out, and check out LowRes Wünderbred on YouTube, where we do a weekly podcast. My co-host Hans and I were talking about, we've been talking recently more so about 2022 films and trying to line that up within the same week that they've been put out. But we do deep dives into older films, more obscure films. We covered things like The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane, which was a 1970s Jodie Foster, Martin Sheen film, or Old Boy, the popular Korean movie, and its horrible Spike Lee remake from 2013. We just cover a whole variety of films. And you can also listen to that on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Movies, a podcast about the act of cinema. So check those out.
Yeah, you and Hans both got called a bunch of toxic dude bros recently, right?
Yeah, we've, with the some episodes of the show have done better than others, and it gets into different circles of the internet and people who are not typically exposed to people who cover movies the way that we do, and some people don't really take to that, and that's fine. I always enjoy reading those comments. I'm very amused by those comments, and if I ever repost it, it's just because I probably LOL'd while reading it. So yeah, I think that was about our episode of Blonde, where they didn't like how we were talking about Marilyn Monroe or something. I don't know. It's fine.
These days, I'm always getting notified on social media about like what comment you leave on like AV Club or something. Like, it's just
here's the thing. So on Facebook, I got put into a 30-day. They tell you we're gonna move your post slower in the feed, and it kills you all of your engagement, right? So I have this Facebook page with like 19,000 followers, and if I post anything now, it gets crushed. It gets fucking nothing. And I was throwing things up. I was getting hundreds of likes, tons of shares. Now I get like 13 likes. It fucking sucks. So I'm like, what? I mean, the suspension is up. Like, they should have moved my stuff back to the top of the feed. Maybe it's just like I got to get back into the algorithm. I have no idea how they're doing things, but I haven't noticed a change. So I'm like, what am I going to do with this account now? I'm just going to leave inflammatory comments on a bunch of articles. And I've realized that people get notified of that, or they see that. And so my comments do way better than anything I actually post on the page. I don't understand the logic of it, but it's fun.
Yeah.
And it's fun, like, stupidly arguing with people and have them take you seriously. And you would just make things up. Like, Bill Murray's in trouble this week. And I'm like, oh yeah, he murdered a dog in a toaster oven on the set of Quick Change. And half of the people will read that and think it's true. They won't even click the article. They'll just see my comment at the top. And I hope they believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a good kick out of the one I just saw earlier today about you're just like flat out say like Martin Scorsese's a Republican. I'm like,
yeah,
that seems to like ruffle some feathers.
He gave a speech at like the New York Film Festival or something. And I don't know. I just want to work people up a little bit.
Sure. Guy got poke the bear every once in a while.
Yeah.
Yes, check out LowRes's stuff. He's got great works in the coming along the way, especially the film Mass Lottery. I'll probably play a trailer for that or feature something at the beginning of this just to give you an extra plug. Check out his stuff, check out his memes, check out everything he's doing. And then you can also follow me over at Jeremobi. I am on YouTube, I am on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm also on Odyssey, where I'm trying to shift more and more of my content over to now, and I'm trying to fight the YouTube algorithm. It's possible this one might make a pass because I don't have as much access to the footage of this movie, but we shall see. Only in time. But yeah, you can find me there. I'm trying to think, and SoundCloud, where the audio version of this podcast will be featured. So yeah, Jeremobi and Fleapit After Hours. I'm the other fun thing, making that little title change was when you started your segment After Dark.
Oh yeah.
It was like within a week when I had like come up with this name, and then I'm like, oh, there's gonna be some weird overlap. I gotta do something.
No, you should just change it. You should. Yeah, I haven't even I have a bunch of episodes backlogged of After Dark niche influential films of the 20th century that I just don't have the time to edit right now. I gotta outsource that editing to somebody. So. I don't know. Your show's the definitive After Dark, is in my head anyway, since you've done far more of these. So it doesn't really matter what it's titled. But thank you for having me on the program and talking about and recommending an interesting film that I might not have gotten around to watching otherwise. And I'm excited to get back to New York and actually give these supplements on this a look, because I haven't been able to do that yet.
Yeah. Definitely, absolutely, and I'm glad to have you on. You're always welcome to come back, and I look forward to future crossovers and seeing where we're all at creatively and whatnot. And check out Takeout if you have not yet. So that is my final word to the viewers and the listeners. All right, LowRes, thank you so much for coming on. This was great.
Absolutely.
This was fun, and you all have a good night. All right, I can cut character now.
Okay.